So here we go. Welcome to Early Care Connection. I'm Izzy Greenberg. Today we are joined by our usual panel of experts, Meryl Gay from the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance and Ava Bermudez-Zimmerman from Child Care for Connecticut's Future campaign. We, of course, want to acknowledge Sandra for providing interpretation for us this morning and remind everyone to speak slowly enough that she can manage that. I want to welcome our community back for another week of knowledge, community building, and solving problems for the early childhood world. Today we'll be focusing on DCF. I hope everyone had a nice restful weekend. If you were marking Ramadan, then I hope that was fulfilling for you. If you were marking Easter, I think there was a lot of holidays this month, but I hope it was all joyous for you all. Okay, so reminder to the community that using the chat for technical difficulties or questions and comments to each other is the right way to go. But if you have questions for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A feature and that will bring them to my attention more easily. So this morning, we are going to focus on DCF. I know that we've talked about this a lot over time, and a few weeks ago, we kind of opened up this conversation. This is a part 2. So I am going to turn it over to Kristen Dudanowitz, who is the CCDF Program Manager for OEC, to introduce the topic. And then we've got a great team here to support her in all of her questions, in all of her comments. We've got Ted Sanford, who's the Director of Contract Management for DCF, Julie Giacone, CCDF Administrator for OEC, Sherry Sutera for United Way of Connecticut. We've got Valerie Grant. We've got Maggie there. We've got a huge, wonderful team of people who know a lot here to help you all get through this. Before we start, I just want to quickly call on Ava Bermudez-Zimmerman, who has a fast announcement, and then we will get right into it with DCF. All right, Ava?
Good morning, everyone. We have been doing a lot of planning with Child Care for Connecticut's Future, 3rd annual Morning Without Child Care Day of Action. And I know many of you have been part of that process and are so excited to incorporate your business as well as your parents in that day of action. Because of unforeseen extreme rain weather, and it's gonna be 39, 40 degrees, we are changing that date to next Wednesday. So you will see on our website all of the RSVP links and the flyers being switched up with the new date of next Wednesday. The times will still be the same for each location, but it won't be this Wednesday, it'll be next Wednesday. The exception to that is kicking off our actions in Mansfield. So if folks are, enthusiastic and happen to be nearby and close a little early on this Tuesday, tomorrow Tuesday, then join us at 5:30 p.m. in Mansfield at the Discovery Depot to share in their day of action inside, indoors, nice and toasty with parents and providers. Again, Mansfield tomorrow, 5:30 p.m., Discovery Depot. And for everyone else is next Wednesday, our day of action, same time and locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Okay, hope to see everybody in 1 week and hunker down in that rain. So stay at home, make a fire if you still have firewood. I don't know, snuggle up. Okay, Kristen, you're up. I'm going to introduce Kristen Dudanowitz, the CCDF Program Manager for OEC, to get us rolling this morning. Kristen, go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Izzy. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you for spending your morning with us again this Monday. We are back today to follow up from when we were here on March 18th to discuss protective services, DCF payments, care for kids, all the things. So I just wanted to let you all know that this is your opportunity to ask questions of DCF, United Way, OEC. There was a lot that day, and we just want the field to be reassured that OEC is doing everything that we can to be responsive to you and helpful for you. and doing the most that we can to make this transition more smooth and an opportunity for us to be more transparent with all of you, kind of to everything that's happening on our end, and our responsibility to you to be open and upfront and let you know kind of what's being what is successful, where areas of opportunity might be. But I know a lot of you had questions for DCF during that last call. So this is really your opportunity. We can open it up to the floor, Izzy, if you want, or I can toss it over to you, Ted, if you want to start with any opening remarks as well. But I do want to just also highlight the partnership that we've had with DCF and United Way throughout this process. Instituting protective services has not been an easy go. As with any change, there are growing pains, there's challenges, there's successes. So we're very grateful for the team over at DCF working with us and taking this journey with us, and we're all in it together. So please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. We are here for you. And I think that's all really I kind of have to say. I do have the slides available from the previous call. If they're helpful for anybody at any time, I'm happy to pull them up. If they answer any of the questions that come up, and I can also, I don't know if I can put a link to them in the chat. Izzy, do you know if I can upload any files?
I can get you that link. We have it from last time.
Okay, perfect. That just might be helpful for reference too. So I think that's it from my end, and I will toss it over to Ted if he has anything, or we can just open up for questions.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kristen. I would just reiterate, it has been a great partnership with OEC and United Way as we move through this process. So it's been a great collaboration, and I think, as Kristen said, there's been some bumps, but we've made a lot of success since starting the initiation back in December. So we can open it up to questions.
Sure, great. Let's see, Meryl, I'm going to call on you. I think that it would be helpful. I know that you've been listening to providers talk about the difficulties, the challenges in this relationship for a long time. And I'm wondering if you could give just a little synopsis, if you know it, of kind of where we stand now, just to get, our guests here and our attendees ready for questions. Like what's on people's minds? What have you been hearing?
Well, I've heard from a lot of people that parents who they thought should have been in the protective services class were sitting on a waiting list, and they were frustrated that they weren't, that they had taken this family on thinking that this was going to be, they were going to be prioritized and therefore get their certificates or get paid more quickly than taking a family that's just going onto the wait list for Care for Kids. And I'm sure that there's some providers on the call who've had this kind of experience or have had other issues with getting families on who are involved with DCF, and I'd love to hear from some of them.
Yeah, great. I don't know if you guys can talk at all about delays or just remind folks of what the process is.
Maybe we should start off with how it's supposed to work.
Exactly.
And then we could identify, people can talk about, where there have been glitches.
So I think this is Sherry. Hi. So I can touch base with how the process works. For protective services, which is families experiencing homelessness, and DCF, and we're talking about DCF today. Care for Kids has it worked out with DCF, so all applications, all renewals, and all new childcare arrangements, if a family changes their childcare provider, are reviewed at DCF, approved at DCF, and then sent to Care for Kids directly from DCF. When they do that, they actually approve it when it comes over. So we already know when it comes in that DCF has vetted the entire arrangement, has approved the arrangement and the payment amount. When that comes over from DCF, all of that work is processed within a week. They are not put on the wait list. They bypass the wait list and they are priority processing. And right now it's taking us between 5 to 7 business days to complete all that work. So that should happen immediately. What we're finding is parents and providers still have not become used to the way the new process is, they may be sending in documents themselves. Providers typically, historically, are super helpful for the Care for Kids process, and they forward a lot of paperwork on behalf of the family. That process is no longer being used, and I believe DCF did send out alerts to all programs. So if something comes in and it is not approved by DCF, our staff don't know that it's an approved DCF protective services. So it will go into the regular processing queue. And if we don't get confirmation from DCF that they are an approved family, they are treated as a PG4 family. So the key here is the process goes through DCF, and I think that's what we need families and providers to get used to how that process works. If they are not routed to us from DCF, they are not marked as priority, and they do not get the priority processing, and they would go through the waitlist process.
So we have an anonymous question here. What's the expectation for provider staff versus DCF staff regarding application and upkeep for certificates?
Pretty much everything gets routed through DCF. So I don't know what the particular question was for, what part of it. Anything to do with an application goes through DCF. Providers, there's no need for them to submit anything to the Care for Kids program. If we get something that is not from DCF and it's marked as protective services, we do not process that. We then take the time and have to send it over to DCF for them to review it. So the process is much more quick. If everybody routes everything through DCF, it's just going to get kicked back to DCF. So we really need providers and parents to understand how the new process has been set up.
Okay, so now is that different if a family is homeless?
Correct. If a family is homeless, when the application comes to us, there is a demarcation point on the application that they check off that signifies that they are a family experiencing homelessness. Our staff identify that, and it goes to our protective services unit, where our team does the McKinney-Vento intake process to verify that they meet the actual protective services category. If they do meet that protective services category based on the McKinney-Vento Act, then they are sent over for priority processing to our protective services unit. So those do not route through any third party. They can come directly from a family, and it's by them checking off that they meet that category. We do have to go through and have attestation signed and make sure that they meet the definition that Care for Kids approves. DCF always funnels through the DCF process.
And I would just add to that from a DCF perspective, our training to all our social work staff is at the time of placement, they complete the application, Care for Kids application with the foster parent, have it signed, identify the daycare or child care agency, and are then instructed to reach out to the child care agency and get the signed PPA from either the child care provider or the foster parent. We then send it to my unit, the grants and contracts unit, and we turn those around within 24 hours, upload them to OEC, and then send notification to the provider that it's been uploaded in a stamped copy of the PPA.
So I'm seeing things in the chat that relying on DCF social workers to submit paperwork has been a problem because social workers are not always on top of the paperwork. This is creating problems for providers who rely on Care for Kids funding for survival, and that many of the DCF social workers themselves are not aware of this process. I'm still telling social workers we should not be doing WAFs anymore.
We should
Georgia?
not.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Please go, Ted.
No, I was going to say, you're absolutely right. We have about 3,000 social workers. My unit did a webinar. It was a mandatory training for every social worker to take that. We've been to every area office, done info sessions with each area office. So there should really be no one in the state that doesn't or is not aware of the process. We're coming to kind of a critical time right now because our third cohort of kids. We're kicking off. We did for children that were in childcare but did not have a Care for Kids certificate. We did a WAF for January, February, March. So as of April 1st, moving forward, any DCF child in receiving daycare will not have a WAF. And we've been working with our staff to do new applications and PPAs. And Aaron Mahoney, who's on the call today, is the manager of that unit, and they've been extremely hard chasing down every social worker, and we have the list of kids. So we're doing our best to chase those down, but all those should be uploaded by today. So there will be no more WAFs.
Okay. And I just promoted Aaron to be a panelist. So if they do want to jump in on the conversation, they're welcome to.
Thank you.
Great. I know, Georgia, you have been I don't know, Georgia, are you available to speak? You're somebody who has really had this issue front and center for a while. Is there, are you available to speak, to just talk about kind of what's currently the things that you see as the biggest problem in this partnership, in this system? Let's see, Georgia, you can go ahead. You should be able to speak.
Just unmute yourself and.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm seeing that there's two Georgias here. All right, try again.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We do
Yes.
hear you. Yep.
All right, so I do want to thank you, Ted, for coming on, and of course, Christian and Sherry for always being available. But when we started this journey with having DCF payments being transferred to Care for Kids, this was designed to make the process easier because many providers were having difficulty being paid because the social workers were the ones responsible for submitting invoices. DCF changed that process and allowed the providers to basically submit the invoices directly to a billing clerk through the grant and contract office so that the payment wouldn't become a bottleneck because your invoice is sitting on the desk of a social worker. Now, Ted, I was involved in a multi-state battle to be paid for over 6 months because a DCF worker forgot to submit a parent's redetermination. And it became a multi-state battle between Connecticut and Florida. And it took me months to be paid for 2 children that I was providing care for. So now the anxiety is returning because you're asking providers once again to rely on the efficiencies of social workers who themselves are overburdened with all the tasks that they have to do. And I know I forget stuff because I have a lot of stuff to do, but with the Care for Kids, providers have developed a system to support families to make sure that those paperworks are going in. So when we now turn over all of that paperwork, and by the way, we're being told that every single child has to have their individual application. So if you have a parent who historically has been able to submit one application for 4 children, for instance, that parent is no longer submitting one application or one redetermination. They are submitting 4 completely different application or redetermination. So if I have a parent of 4, which I do, that's about 4 separate application, PPAs, and redetermination that one social worker for one parent has to stay on top of. And so again, I just want to share with you that while you're saying that this is supposed to happen, it is not what's currently happening. I had to tell a provider, a DCF social worker 2 weeks ago when she was asking me for a WAF. I was just like, I thought we didn't have to do a WAF. And then I emailed the grants contract person along with her, and they said, oh, yes, that's correct. Now, Sherry said these applications should be processed within a week. We still have not received a certificate for this child. And because I don't know what happened to this application, I have no way to track it, and I have not received anything from Care for Kids. I don't even know what the status of this child is. So again, this feels this process that DCF has created with Care for Kids feels it feels as if it's ignored the problems from the past, and it's created more complication in the system, and it's creating anxiety in the system. And I had to talk to a provider last week. I hope she's here. I hope she'll present herself. But when you also talk to the DCF worker, their position is just like, whatever, talk to whomever, do whatever. But it's a sort of like, we're getting the same type of responses from the social workers, and we shouldn't have to rely on somebody's generosity to follow through on the paperwork that they're supposed to do to be paid.
Thank you, Georgia.
Georgia, I would 100% agree with you. Part of the application process and what we've tried to do to streamline that is based on protective services. It no longer requires the 4-page full application to be completed. We've simplified the application. So even though it's for each child, we've actually sat down and done it as part of our training. We feel like we've streamlined it as much as we can to make it as easy for foster parents as possible. I will bring back your comments to our commissioner in terms of what you're experiencing from our social work staff, and bring that feedback back, because I agree with you that that shouldn't be happening, and that's not our goal during this transition process.
Great, thank you.
Apologies, Izzy, but what happens when a DCF worker does not submit that paperwork at the time that that paperwork is supposed to be submitted? What happens to the payment? So let's say I took a child in at the beginning of March, and the DCF worker did not submit the paperwork until the end of March. What happens to the payment?
Our training is they cannot start daycare until the paperwork's submitted and we've approved and stamped the application in PPA.
That was also the training with the WAF. But the DCF worker comes to us and the parents come to us and they're pressuring us to take the children before this paperwork has been done. And so that is the reality on the ground. And when you have a parent that's desperate and a DCF worker that's desperate saying, please take this child, like they did in the case of the WAF, when it was related to the WAF, this is where we would then get in difficulties with the grants and contracts folks, because they're saying you shouldn't have taken the child without this. But when you're engaging with the social worker and the foster parent who's desperate for childcare and are begging you to do this, and you're relying on the DCF worker to make sure that everything is done in a timely manner, what happens is when we take the children in because we're responding to the crisis in that family in the moment, then we are the ones that get the full brunt of, well, nobody followed the protocol. And so therefore, sorry, providers, even though you put yourself out there to support this family and to support the agency, too bad for you, we're not going to pay you.
We've been very clear with our staff, and we've tried to come a long way in terms of the WAF process and with our provider network, that you shouldn't take a kid unless you have a WAF, because that's the purchase order that we use in terms of the payment process. We're going to have to work through this process with our staff, but we're going to take the same. I know our CFO has been very clear that without that stamped application in PPA, a daycare provider should not accept a child.
All right. Georgia, did you have a follow-up?
I also want to raise the concern about the fact that we have heard from our members, a few of our members, that the DCF workers are also pressuring them to lower their rate. And we've heard that for the past couple of years. So this is not recent to this. But my other concern again is this approval process where DCF workers are challenging providers, more specifically the family childcare providers, on the rates that they should be charging. I want you to address that, because what we have told our providers is your rate should be your rate, and DCF should not tell you that you cannot charge them your rate. I have to confess, DCF has never said that to me as a provider. I've not heard that from my center-based providers, but I've heard from my family childcare providers the challenge that they have with DCF when DCF is challenging them on their rates and saying, no, you cannot charge us this amount, you have to charge us something else.
That we review previous WAF and now a PPA. The only times that rates have come to my attention is when a provider charges a public child an X amount, and when it's a DCF child, they up their rate. That's the only time I've ever heard of one of my staff pushing back on a provider. So if you're charging X amount per week, and then all of a sudden you get a DCF foster care child and you're adding $200 on that, that's the pushback. We are actually paying the full PPA for whatever fee you're charging. My staff are accepting that, stamping it, and sending it to OEC. I've been down here 2 years, 3 or 4 situations where my grants and contracts folks had the information that there was a different rate being charged to DCF versus a public child.
And
Other than that, we're not telling you have to lower your rate. That's not our direction to our staff.
And I will confirm, Ted, that I've also heard that is a scenario, but I just wanted to be very clear with you that is in fact could potentially be the scenario, and that there is a situation where providers are being told that they cannot charge beyond a certain point.
You're right. And if, we've messaged our staff in those situations is the foster parent has to find another provider, because you can charge whatever you would like. That doesn't mean that we have to purchase it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Georgia. And we have another provider also, Kamara Moody, who would like to join the conversation. Kamara, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your questions or tell your experience.
Hi, good morning. I'm
Good morning.
Kamara from Bridgeport. So my experience with DCF was very unpleasant. It started back in October, so of course it was the old process going through DCF. My social worker totally placed the kid and disappeared and did nothing. Absolutely nothing. So for that one child, I didn't get paid until January, and I had to go through the contract person here to get my payment. So at that point, the parent had applied for Care for Kids, but Care for Kids had kicked, the foster parent that is, they had kicked back her application because they wanted it in January. In January, she redid the application. It went to the person who was helping me to make this a smooth process, because 3 months, no payments, and honestly, she was helping me. But for every time I inquired about my money, I was told that she was granting me a favor. Explicitly, she said, I'm granting you a favor. I'm not even your social worker. Well, I told her she's not granting me a favor. I think it's her job. With that being said, she dropped the ball. So here's January and February, no money. Care for Kids sent the application back because it wasn't stamped. And my problem with a lot of these DCF workers, they're not teachable at all. You cannot tell them anything. It's a new process. They've never done Care for Kids before. If I'm the provider and I know it has to be stamped because I did get the memo, and I'm helping you to make it, much easier for everyone involved. Oh, she sent it, it wasn't stamped. It came back. No, it's March. And she refused to answer any phone calls, emails, nothing. So the foster parents sent an email and CC'd a bunch of people. That got nowhere. So I got Christian's email and I emailed Christian. And let's just say in less than 24 hours, everything was done. When I tell you it was done expeditiously, from Christian to another Christian to Aaron, and I got a certificate in 10 hours and I got my money from DCF last week for January and February. It was done, but I should not have to go through all that to get my money. I provided a service. The kid has never been absent. Early every day and picked up right at 5:30 when I close. So if I'm providing a service, I need to be paid. I don't need someone to tell me they're granting me a favor when it's their job. That does not sit well with me. And I decided I wouldn't take Care for Kids, DCF kids no more. I just didn't want to be bothered. But I had another foster parent reach out. So I told her, I said, I won't take the kid unless I have a certificate. I said, I want to speak with a social worker. Now, this social worker was teachable. She came to the center. We sat, I explained the application process, the PPA, we did a complete walkthrough. And I told her, I said, unless I have that certificate in my inbox, the child cannot grace my doors. Like, can't. The experience just wasn't good and I'm not risking it anymore. Honestly, he promised me to get it done. She was new to the process, but she was teachable. And in 10 days, I had a certificate. The day she emailed to ask if the kid could start, I said, let me check my email, and the certificate was there. So the kid started last week. But when I tell you, she had put the work in. I followed through with Care for Kids. When she said she submitted it, I waited my 48 hours. I followed up with Care for Kids. It was there. But she literally did the work and got it done. If other people would do their job, it would be much easier. But for people to be telling me they're granting me a favor, I just don't understand. That's beyond me. That was rude. And this is what we're subjected to. And I just think it's unfair. It's unfair to providers. These social workers know nothing about a PPA. They need to be able to learn. And they don't want to be, they don't want to be taught. They will tell you explicitly. When we finally found the social worker for my first kid, he didn't want to hear anything. He did not know what he was doing, but he didn't want to learn. So I had to go to Christian. Again, I shouldn't have to do that. That should not be the case at all. And I hope going forward, it will just, get better, because these kids are going to be left out in the cold at some point. If I'm not getting paid, I'm not going to take them. And that's not fair to the kids either.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks,
So
Maura.
people on the call, Christian is the office director in the Bridgeport office. And a provider nor foster parent should have to go up to that chain of command to get this done. I am happy to say that when you had the right social worker, the process worked the way it should be working. So our goal, and again, I'm going to bring this up on Thursday. I have a meeting with our office directors and our child welfare staff. I'm going to bring this back because you're absolutely right, that our staff should not, that's not the way they should be approaching this.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Izzy, I wanted to raise a couple of questions that are here in the chat.
Great.
About, for instance, a child who is in a center already and then goes into foster care, and how that transition is supposed to happen and how it is working.
Yep, Meryl, I was just about to answer that one. Not knowing the specifics, if the child was already a Care for Kids approved child enrolled in the center and then goes into foster care, we would get paperwork from DCF. And so what we would do is behind the scenes, move that child from whatever priority group they are in, most likely priority group 4, and behind the scenes move them into the protective services category so that they are categorized appropriately, so they bypass all wait lists and they go through the DCF payment approval process. But there should be no disruption in care if the child was already a Care for Kids enrolled child. They would just get updated paperwork and they would now be categorized as protective services. If it is a child that is not currently on the Care for Kids program, the process would go through when DCF submits paperwork to the Care for Kids program, approving them as a DCF approved child, and the PPA with the guaranteed payment rate that DCF has approved. Care for Kids would reissue certificates for that child with the updated information. There should be no disruption. Well, if they weren't Care for Kids prior, it will be like the usual process of them being approved, and the payment now goes through Care for Kids with the Care for Kids portion and DCF payment portion, if any, on that same invoice.
And another question that came up earlier about WAFs still being used for summer care. It sounds like we're sort of creating an exception to a new rule.
WAFs, so WAFs are going to be utilized for summer camp, not
Okay.
for summer care. So for summer care, if the child's the only thing is if there's extended hours, we would just need an updated PPA if they're attending extended hours due to summer. But we're doing summer camps via WAF, not daycare.
Okay.
Cheryl is also a provider and wanted to ask her question. Cheryl, you're welcome to join in.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just listening back and forth, and I had just a situation where I had a child who was DCF, has been with me since October, was getting payments, everything was fine. The child was adopted in January. And then it went right to Care for Kids, but I was never notified. I was never told that DCF is no longer in action. Once we realized we weren't getting any payments, I called the DCF representative. She said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, I closed the case. We have nothing to do with this child anymore. Care for Kids is the one that you need to submit invoices, and Care for Kids is the one that you need to do all your processes with from now on. This is where the child is." Now, I don't have Care for Kids licensing anymore. I don't have any family. So I chose not to do all the enrollments and things that you need to be a provider with all your staff. I purposely did that because I don't have enough families to go through all that work. They kept continually for a month telling me I had to go through all those steps just to get this child accepted for me to get payments. But other people in the system was saying, no, that's not true. They can bypass it just for this child. So nobody would get back to me. Every time you called, it was in this one particular woman that the only number I had was her answering machine was like the oldest message, like almost a year ago, or whatever message that she had on her voicemail. Never would get back to me. Finally got back to me, and they kept sticking with that. I had to do all those procedures to even have this happen. So finally, when I asked for her supervisor, she called, she apologized. She said that I did not need to have my qualifications for this child. But the whole point was that, and she apologized for the DCF worker. She was supposed to send me applications to give to my parents so they could fill it out and this child could get accepted, and then Care for Kids could begin. They didn't even do that step, where the mother had no idea. I had no idea that something was even supposed to be sent to me so I could fill it out. And it was just so unfortunate. And the time that I had to spend just sticky notes everywhere. Don't forget to call. Don't forget to call. Be on them. Ask them, please. Talk nicely. Anything you could possibly do for someone to get back to you. And now the way it is right now, this one woman was amazing. I went back to work at 8 o'clock at night, faxed her everything she needed, because there was another thing. I guess you have to have it in within 15 days from the adoption. And so it was like, thank God I was on it, because she's like, you have like one more day left. Went in at 8 o'clock at night, faxed her everything, and she processed it all. But right now I have no idea if it's really going to go through. I still haven't got paid since January. And it's a lot of money a month not to have, and not knowing if you're really going to get it.
So our subsidy unit has been part of this entire process. So as a DCF social worker sends a subsidy packet for an adoptive family, the new application is going to be part of that process. So as soon as that child's adopted, my staff are uploading that to Care for Kids just like a foster child. It sounds like the timing of this one was kind of got caught in between. From a DCF perspective, you have to have an approved subsidy as part of the packet for DCF to stamp and be part of the process of payment. So I'm not sure if that situation, the daycare was part of the subsidy or not. It's not an automatic.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I mean, there's a lot, everybody's got such different things. And I think what's really great about today's call is that it helps to bring this to the surface and get it. Obviously, folks who are taking this, who are on this call, want to hear what others people's experience are in case there's something they're dealing with. But I think it's also helpful for you, Ted, and others to hear directly from providers, what their experiences are. So Ava, I'm going to call on you next.
We have a couple comments here on the Q&A, and some of them are in Spanish. So I just wanted to highlight some of the comments here from anonymous attendee. She writes in Spanish, I'm not quite sure what's happening with the pay, but it is clear to me that the social worker might not have a clear grasp. They're missing, they tell me that they're missing hours, and they're missing pay information, which I completed in order to have my contract up to date with the parent. But still I'm not approved. How I guess this person's just vocalizing their frustration because on their end, they did everything right. On the social worker's end, it seems that they're not, and they're missing documents. So Ted, with this comment, as well as Lynn Behrman says, please, when DCF places an emergency family with you, most of our, we or most shouldn't turn them away. So you have like comments here, and then Lynn again, never has DCF walked in with paperwork until after the family has been placed. Most of my emergency families could be less than 24 hours before start of care. We have Maria Reyes saying, I stopped taking DCF children because they still owed me money. Like Kamara said, the social worker doesn't do their job. And then in another anonymous, social workers doing the WAF and for summer camps and Care for Kids children before and after care, we need to make sure that we understand. So I guess the summary of all these comments, so many of them in the Q&A, is even though between OEC, United Way, and DCF, there is a significant attempt to try to streamline this process and make it better, there are a lot of cracks and it's very confusing. So whatever all of your departments can do to be a little bit more hands-on training with your staff and make sure that they have the patience to give to the providers going through this difficult process of paperwork, then it would make a big difference, right? Providers are overworked, they're underpaid, they're tired, and to have one more hurdle of paperwork being lost and literally in communication, it just doesn't feel fair, and they definitely don't want to wait to get paid. So I'll mute myself.
So I'm wondering, is there a way in which we could troubleshoot the problems that are out there? You know, a place where people could send an email saying, this is what happened to me, how do we fix it? Something that, you know, you've got the transition of people who were being paid for with WAFs who are now getting paid for by Care for Kids. You've got people who feel like they're owed money for a while and they're not sure where things fell apart, but they'd like to figure out what, you know, how to get paid. Is there somebody who folks can sort of share that message with and have a way we can, okay, so I'm seeing Ted is saying, send an email to him, and the email is there in the chat, theodore.sanford@ct.gov.
And Meryl, if you don't mind, if I just chime in really quickly for a second, Sherry, I would ask if you guys can also share a contact at United Way, whether it you or somebody on the Protective Services team that can direct connect with these providers.
Absolutely. So point of contact with them at the Care for Kids program.
Yeah, I think specifically, you know, probably somebody in the Protective Services unit makes sense, that can help troubleshoot some of these issues. And as always, anybody can feel free to send me emails as well. I'll put my email in the chat.
And I will put mine in there too, as always, and I will route it accordingly, depending, I'm typing my email, sorry, depending on what the question is. So we will route accordingly. So again, my email's in the chat. So we will get that over to the Protective Services unit if that's where it needs to go. Absolutely.
Great. So,
And
all right. Yeah, please go.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I just want to thank everybody for being very transparent with the issues that they're experiencing. You know, we are doing the best we can to make this the best process for everybody, and understand that, you know, as Ava so eloquently put it, there are cracks, and our job is to try and fill those. So we, you know, we'll take this back. We can debrief this entire conversation. We meet regularly with DCF and United Way. We have a recurring meeting. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to, you know, go back together, take an opportunity, look at where there might be opportunities. And I just want to let everybody know, you know, I'm sorry that this process is not working as it should for a lot of the providers. And I'm very happy for the ones that it is. But please continue to let us know any challenges, raise them up, because if we don't know about it, we can't help you. So our job is to help you. And any, you know, if any changes arise or come down the pike through these conversations, we'll make sure to communicate that. And I will just follow up one quick thing too from the last meeting. We heard very clearly that we're not being transparent enough in communicating with providers. So that is something that we have taken to heart too on the OEC side, and we are thinking of ways that we can communicate better, how we should communicate better. So I just want to let you guys all know that your input does not go, you know, to the wayside. We do take it to heart. We are learning from it. So just really appreciate everybody taking the time to highlight any challenges that they're having right now.
This is Maggie Adair. Kristen, thank you for your comments. We definitely take this to heart, and we will be taking this back to find ways to improve the process on part of both agencies and the United Way.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, what I'm seeing, you know, can you make sure social workers are responding in a timely manner? How do we get, you know, email sent to us better? Like a lot of this stuff. How do we send the documents to DCF? A lot of this is like, these are technical details, you know, the stuff that George is talking about, and the stuff that some of the providers who spoke are talking about. That's one side of it. And it seems like there's a whole other side, which is just the ease of the process, these sort of technical elements. And so, I mean, that feels, I know that state government is cumbersome, but that feels like the low hanging fruit, getting that's, and probably a ton of people are dealing with that kind of stuff. So, being able to get that stuff fixed would probably go a long way. And then we've got these bigger, kind of more major issues that also need to be solved at the same time. So I want to just welcome Georgia. Georgia, it sounded like you had one more comment or question you wanted to jump in with.
I do. I want to say the big issue that we had before in payment that DCF marginally fixed, and I shouldn't say marginal because that's unfair. You guys fixed it for the most part, was that you removed the payment process and the invoicing process away from the social workers. We're saying to you that process does not work. It did not work with the WAF, and it is not going to work here. The social workers, you should not be, it should not be a roll of a dice with which social worker you get to ensure that you are paid. DCF changed the process so that there was a billing person. It was one person that you could reach out to, send your invoices to, and it doesn't matter who the social worker was with the child, you basically dealt with that one billing person. The thing is, the social workers they change all the time. So if you have a child that have a social worker one day, and then that social worker change, you will not know until that social worker is walking through your door because there is not timely communication. When a child switches from foster care to adoptive care, that is never communicated to us. That has never been communicated to us. In the 18 years that I've been working with DCF, none of those communication occurs. The communication about who the new social worker is never occurs until that social worker walks through the door or have to engage with us. What helped the process was that we had a dedicated billing person that dealt with all of the invoice. So we just had one person, regardless of who the social worker was, to deal with that. I would strongly suggest that that be the process that we adopt because that did ease the tension in the payment process for providers after we raised the issue several years ago. Again, it's the social workers, God bless them. We have several of them who have childcare in our facility. They are under a lot of stress. And adding this very complicated process, even though we're saying you're trying to minimize the complication, where this process basically determines whether a provider can pay their bill or not, adding that responsibility to a social worker on top of everything else, I don't think that is the proper way to go. The other thing that we are suggesting is when JFIS used to have Care for Kids, they used to stamp those paperwork. And the paperwork can come to us with a JFIS stamp, and we fill it out, and that immediately identified the parent as a JFIS parent to Care for Kids. Why can't we just have paperwork that has DCF stamps on it so that the parent can bring those DCF stamped forms and we submit those forms? Would that be a solution?
I just want to clarify, you're referencing the invoicing to so you're suggesting the PPA and app come from the provider. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. So can there be a process where the Care for Kids if the foster parent has a child, especially in emergency case, there are DCF forms or the application or redetermination on the PPA has a stamp with the DCF stamp on it. So then that paperwork is coming to us and we can just do what we've always done. And when that Care for Kids application goes in, because it has the DCF stamp on it, that immediately identifies to care for kids, that this is a DCF case. Could we not use a process like JAFA's had, where their application is stamped with a DCF stamp?
Yeah, so from an auditing perspective, we cannot pre-stamp and send out the stamp that we're sending the PPA and app to Care for Kids means from an auditing perspective that our staff have reviewed the PPA and approved it. If we just let the provider send in a PPA with a general stamp, that we would take an audit hit on that. So that process wouldn't be able to work. We actually have to approve the PPA before it's stamped.
So could you then go back to that system where you have a billing person that is the one that all of the invoices go through,
So
rather than the social workers?
I will bring that back. Unfortunately, we only have 6 grants and contracts people, 1 in each region. So it really comes down to a resource issue. But Georgia, I will bring that back. We had kicked that around a little bit. But as this process is moving forward in what we're hearing today in terms of the difficulty with DCF social workers, Aaron and I will bring that back to our management team.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have answered almost all of the questions either in writing or out loud. Meryl or Ava, are there any remaining questions that you wanted to make sure got answered this morning or got asked?
I have a comment, just a quick comment. I just want to highlight for DCF, United Way, and also OEC that even though we only have a handful of people who, providers who are able to speak today live, and probably maybe like 20 questions that came in the course of my goodness, 12 years now working with childcare providers and working in early ed. This is an issue that's come up repeatedly. So I don't want any of you from the different agencies and organizations online thinking, well, there's only 20 people who have been impacted by these problems with DCF. The universe is much larger, and we do really hope that the changes that you make, you have that in the back of your minds, that almost every provider at a certain point probably has had a problem with the process, and now hopefully you're taking that in consideration as you move forward.
So, yeah, I just wanted to add, since we are now changing something again as of April 1st, if we might ask you to come back in a month or two, just to see that there aren't more problems as a result of that change that providers are experiencing.
We'd be willing to do that, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Great,
That's what
thank you. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is there's one thing to have the providers and their social workers interact. There's another for emails to be going, but for a conversation to happen like this with 200 people in live time, I think you actually you can affect the change more quickly. You can elevate the issues. You can kind of get all of that information all at once. And as I mentioned in the chat to our folks here who have put questions and comments out there, we will send all of the questions and chat comments to all of you folks after this is over, so that you can, spend a little time with them when you're not having camera pressure also, and see where you can make some difference there. So I think if we could get you guys back on in I don't know, we'll figure out what the right date is, but I think that having this be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing partnership to improve this system, that's the goal. The goal is to care for children the best way we all can, and to have those providers be cared for the best way that they can be in that process. So I really appreciate everyone for being here. I know these are tough conversations because it's about cracks in the system, as Ava said, but the work we're doing is like little bits of mortar. we're figuring it out as we go along. So thank you, Ted, so much for being here, to Kristen, and of course to all of the other folks here who are answering questions behind the scenes and providing support, Julie, Sherry, Maggie, Valerie, Aaron, and of course to all of our courageous and thoughtful advocates and providers in this community, at Camera and Georgia and Cheryl, for raising those issues and highlighting them. I'm going to turn it over to Ava one more time before we leave, just to let everybody know about the Morning Without Childcare postponement because of inundation of rain this week. And so Ava, I'll let you just wrap it up with that announcement. And of course, thank you again to all of our guests this morning. And we will hopefully see you soon for a part 3 of this conversation. So thank you. All right, Ava.
So once again, for those who jumped on a little later onto this call, the April 3rd Day of Action, our Childcare for Connecticut's Future Morning Without Childcare Day of Action rallies that were scheduled to be on Wednesday are going to be moved to, our new tentative date here, because the weather's looking bright and sunny, is next Wednesday. So we are making the adjustments today to the flyers, to the website, to all of our materials, to let folks know, also starting to call providers and let them know. We know for some of you, you've made arrangements with your parents and arrangements with your staffers to be there this Wednesday, and that puts a strain on your date, your staffing. But the Day of Action, it was originally meant to provide a little bit of strain on everyone to prove the point that childcare is a difficult thing to navigate, right? We are living in the difficulty. Today's call was talking about how difficult it is to get paid and survive and balance your bills and your staff, right? Childcare for Connecticut's Future and Morning Without Childcare is highlighting that stress and highlighting it to the legislators and the elected officials who need to do something about it. So we do hope that you all have the ability to come to the new date, considering that this Wednesday is going to be 39, 40 degrees and pouring. I'm pretty sure most of us would prefer being out there on a 60-degree day, nice and sunny, clear skies. So be on the lookout. Check out the website, Childcare4CT, childcareforct.org, for all of the new information. And we do hope to spread the word.
All right. Thank you so much. And that link is in the chat. Everybody have a wonderful week. Please hunker down in the rain, stay safe. A lot to think through here. You're always welcome to send emails to info@earlycareconnection.org. The recording of this will be posted there after this, sometime in the next 24 hours. And you have the email addresses now of folks who were on this call if you want to chat with them directly. So thanks, everyone. Stay safe and spread the word. We still have more time to get people RSVP'd for April 10th now. All right. We'll see you all next week. Thanks again.